For the longest, it's been things like my body, my choice. Uh, don't fat shame me. Accept me how I am. Uh, fat and beautiful, or big and beautiful, whatever you want to refer to it as. And there's been numerous people, even on medical doctors, that will come out and say, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're a little overweight. You have all types of people that come out of the woodwork that have a different sort of narrative when it comes to being obese or overweight, or not being in shape, etc. And then real life hits you with a gut check, and then people want to complain about racism, about unfairness, etc. And then Mother Nature, or whatever you want to refer to it as, evolution, etc., basically comes out with its own narrative and says, well, what you think I don't really care about, because my facts don't care about your feelings. And so the CDC, as of the 8th, comes out and says, CDC study finds that about 78% of people hospitalized for COVID were overweight or obese. There's about 78% of people who were hospitalized and needed a ventilator or died from COVID-19 have been overweight or obese, the Center for Disease Control Prevention said in a new study on Monday. So not only was it individuals who were impacted to the point that they experienced death, but even referring to all individuals who required hospitalization and who later on required to be placed on a ventilator were all impacted by one of the number one causes for the death in reference to COVID-19, which is weight. And for the longest, people have been saying that there's absolutely nothing wrong with being overweight. We should accept people as they are. Don't fat shame me. Even Bumble even came out with their own little advertisement about no fat shaming. We're gonna be careful about who says what in terms of what sort of preferences that you want. And yet reality has its own narrative, right? So for men, especially for men who were like, I'm not looking to date somebody who is more leaning on the who is overweight to obese, because I know from a health perspective and just biology in general, in terms of procreation, it will impact my seed. And so, of course, here in the leftist West of America, the narrative is that we should, as men, should accept whatever it is that comes our way. We should just be grateful that even a woman chooses to tolerate our existence, and we should just accept them as they are. And then life has a different story. There's just over 42% of the US population was considered obese in 2018, according to the agency's most recent statistics. Overweight is defined as having a body mass of above 25, of an BMI index of 25 or more, while obesity, of course, is defined as having a BMI of 30. As clinicians develop care plans for COVID-19 patients, they should consider the risk for severe outcomes in patients with higher BMIs, especially for those with severe obesity. And you can see, of course, the picture, but then you can also see even the person who's here to pick them up, right? You can see a little bit of a gut, right? You can see the little square body, even the gentleman, right? Even the gentleman look a little bit out of shape, could probably lose a few pounds, but then you can see the older patient with the big old gut. And this, of course, heavily impacts patient outcomes. Originally they were saying, well, why is it that C19 it's affecting primarily people of color, like Hispanics or blacks, and overwhelmingly taking the lives of men, as if the virus was somehow racist or sexist and would select based off of the person's sex or the person's race, which was nonsensical. But that's what politicians led many to believe, that the reason that most blacks and Hispanics were having a worse outcome than, for example, whites, was because it's racism and the system is racist and white racism and privilege and all this, that, and the other. When reality speaks, when you look at the statistics, unfortunately, overwhelmingly within both blacks and Hispanics, they have a higher rate of obesity. I did that video just the other day talking about that 4 out of 5 black women are considered overweight to obese. 80% of all black women in America lean more towards being overweight and obese, and as a result, so do the men. And of course, as a result, from the health perspective, from a health standpoint, the outcome is what it is. And so instead of politicians coming out and being straightforward and saying the reason that many of you are losing your life is because of the food that you put in your mouth, the lack of exercise, and so what we're going to do is we're going to help you and make sure you get yourself into the gym. We're going to make sure that those who cannot afford to get into a gym, we're going to do our best to find some funding for these individuals, but instead it was the opposite. It was stay home, gyms got shut down, and they told you to wear a mask and wash your hands. But there was never any information regarding making sure that you changed your eating habits, or that you went out and did some weight loss exercise. In fact, quite the opposite. Many people notice, for example, putting on a couple of extra pounds, what they refer to as the quarantine 15, which for some individuals might be the quarantine 25. And as a result, you see a higher prevalence of deaths. And people sit here and wonder, can't imagine why America is so heavily impacted by the virus. They want to blame one president while lauding the other, when meanwhile, it was really your own individual choices in regards to the food that you put in your body, or the exercise or lack thereof that you do on a daily basis that affects the outcomes. Surprise, surprise. The article also goes on to say, among the 148,000 adults who received the diagnosis during an emergency visit or inpatient visit at 238 U.S. hospitals from March to December, 71,000 were hospitalized. Of those who were admitted, 27, almost 28% were overweight, and 50% were obese. And that's basically been my findings. Like I've said, most of the patients that I have had, either who were elderly, were typically elderly who were a little bit more on the obese end, but also had a laundry list of comorbidities, and the people who were a bit on the younger end were more like the people who were 200 to 250 pounds, which also had things like diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and some of them even had polysubstance abuse or problems with their sugar, etc. Right? These were not individuals who were, as you might imagine or misled to believe, the epitome of health, who were walking into the hospital. Many of these individuals weren't even compliant with just keeping their oxygen on. Just to show you how some people are just stubborn about when it comes to basically saving themselves. Some people just don't want to participate in their own salvation. And at what point, what can you do for them? As the agency found, the risk for hospitalization, ICU admissions, and death was lowest among individuals who had a BMI of under 25. So if you were obviously younger, healthier, not as overweight as many of the other ones, your outcome and your likelihood of actually being hospitalized was almost non-existent, according to their statistics. It says the risk of severe illness sharply increased. However, as BMI rose, particularly among, no surprise, older individuals, right? Those who were 65 and older. It says just over 42% of the U.S. population was considered obese in 2018, according to the agency's most recent statistics. CDC issues new guidelines regarding vaccinations. It says it doesn't take a lot of extra pounds to be considered overweight. A 5 foot 10 pound, 175 pound man and a 5'4" woman at 146 were both considered overweight. Now, most women in America who are that height do not weigh that, as your average woman in America weighs 170 pounds, almost as much as your average man. It goes on to state, a man and woman whose height and weight would be considered obese are at 210 pounds and 175 pounds respectively. And that's where the majority of women are. The majority of women in America, the average weight for a female in America is 170 pounds. It's easily verifiable with a simple Google search. As clinicians develop care plans, it says they should consider the risk for severe outcomes in patients with higher BMIs, especially those with severe obesity. The CDC added that the findings highlight the clinical and public health implications of higher BMIs, including the promotion of COVID prevention strategies, such as continued vaccination prioritization, basking on policies to ensure communities access to nutrition and physical activities. But of course, that was one of the things that was the first thing to go, those physical activities. In some countries, you can't even go outside. Like, for example, in Southern Australia, where you couldn't even go for a walk. They were like, no, you need to stay your ass inside, and you need to send us a text message if you're going to leave your house, and we'll let you know if you can leave to walk your dog. And you're like, what? But this is, at the end of the day, this is a result of individuals choosing to give up their freedom and having the government, in essence, save them while actually not even doing that competently. And unfortunately, now that the government has all of your freedoms, they have no intention of giving them back. And this is a result of the choices that we have made as a society to basically look to the government for our salvation while they never actually do any of that. Still waiting on that stimulus check, I bet, huh? Hopefully one day people in America will learn. More than likely, the younger generations who are coming up, who are watching their family members, and other individuals who are older than them, and they're seeing the mistakes that they made. And I hope that you will not make those same mistakes and safeguard your freedom. You may one day be called to fight for it yet again.